We'll share who we are, and then who Up for Learning is, and our why, what, and how, and then we have a way for you to introduce yourselves to us and to each other. So I'm Lindsay Hallman, my pronouns are she, her. I'm the Executive Director at Up for Learning. Up for Learning stands for Unleashing the Power of Partnership for Learning. Fun fact is I started my teaching career in 2003 at MAUSD. That was my first year teaching as a middle school educator. I was hired on there was a population bubble, 2003, and I had the only multi-age team. We were a 7-8 multi-age team, and I was at MAUSD for 3 years before we were living at that point in Burlington. So I moved to Essex for the rest of my teaching career in middle level. So I just wanted to, I have roots here. I have very fond memories of my experience at MAUSD, and I believe there's so much around innovation, creativity, colleagueship, collaboration that really that is the foundation of MAUSD. That's what I experienced when I was there, and it's been many years since that time, but I imagine it's still a foundation of your district. I'll pass it to my colleague to introduce.
Hi, I'm Susanna. I use she, her pronouns, and I had the delight of joining Up this summer as a program director. Prior to that, I have a background. I was a middle school history teacher for a really long time in Massachusetts, and then I moved up here and I was Rutland Northeast's equity coach for 3 years. And I, through that role, had the joy of being an adult partner for Up for Learning's programs at Otter Valley, and I'm really, really excited to be in the program director role and keep up with that, really fantastic work. I found schools can be really confusing and are really confusing places right now and can be really fraught, and I found that the work of Up for Learning was like a small island of coherence where I knew okay, today is an up day, I'm gonna feel the value of the work, and so I've lived it, and now I'm on this side of things.
So we're going to do a little intro to who we are. Some of you, it sounds like, have history too with Up for Learning. So we'll give you a little bit of who we are and then our why, what, and how. We are in our 16th year. We actually started as an organization called YATS, Youth and Adults Transforming Schools Together. What we would say is historically we were a Vermont nonprofit. Now we're a nonprofit based in Vermont because our work now is very expansive throughout the country. So we work in many different states. Again, Vermont is really kind of our home base. We have an office in Waterbury, but we all work all over the state and all over the country towards our why, what, and how. And that why is that fundamental paradigm shift around what it means to be a young person in the educational system and having things done to and for you all the time, and also to be an adult perhaps in the school system and having things done to and for you. So we really look at how can we shift towards partnership so that youth and adults are partnering in school change where they're sharing power, voice, and responsibility. And that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But it takes first that exploration of exploring your mental models. We'll also share these slides with you, so if you cannot read all this text right now, it's totally okay. But this just gives you kind of some entry into who we are and what we do. I want to just back up and say, I think I was contacted maybe in the spring.
Julie Pettis, our social emotional learning coordinator.
Thank you. And she was curious about an equity-centered approach that at the time was really focused on restorative practices, social emotional learning. Well, that's kind of just embedded into youth adult partnership. And so as we started talking, I was thinking, wow, it sounds like maybe that it would be really good to think bigger picture around the vision. And to ensure that really equity is centered in that visioning process. And then when I had the opportunity to talk with Patrick and Katrina, it really felt like this was the right direction for you all and for your community to really set the stage for the larger vision, to have everyone's voices involved in that work, and then to do your board work from there, and then the individual school work from there. So at Up for Learning, we believe that educational equity is a basic human right. Everything that we do, our core values is seek equity and justice in all that we do. We do that through these different principles. One is sharing responsibility. Youth and adults need to be sharing responsibility in school change. Parents, caregivers, the whole community needs to be sharing responsibility. It's not just up to 1 or 2 or 10 people. We always start with strengths. So I remember in our conversation that we had, there was all these amazing things that are already in motion and also have happened that you all have been a part of in creating ENDS policies and all the transferable skills and the competencies and all the things. There's a lot of amazing stuff that's already happening. You've been working with a lot of great community partners. So let's start there and lift that up and then build from there. So we always take an assets-based approach. We know that when you start with a deficit-based mindset, you don't feel energized to do any work. Part of our guiding principles is to create open dialogue. So that means youth and adults talking together, using protocols that really ensure that everyone has equitable space to share their ideas and opinions. Community dialogues is a part of our approach, so how do we capture the voices of the larger community? I always think about it as kind of like ripples. You might have a core team. Their job is to then mobilize another layer of that, which then ripples out to the larger community. How do we get as many voices as possible engaged in thinking about school change? And then the way that we go about it is through employing data to drive change. So we use youth participatory action research as our vehicle, I'll just fast forward there, as our vehicle for change. And so this is the process that we use with all of our school district community teams is the participatory action research cycle, where we start with building relationships. It takes time for youth and adults to be sitting side by side and doing this work together, for school staff and families to be sitting side by side and doing this work together, for school board members and members of the community to be sitting side by side. So we take time to develop those relationships. We develop the critical awareness. Okay, so where are the inequities in our system? What needs to be addressed? Whose voices aren't heard? Whose voices are always heard? Who else needs to be here? And then we develop our research question, then we collect data. We're engaging the community every step of the way through both the data collection, the data analysis, the sharing back, and then moving into implementing change, an action plan for change. So that's kind of a really quick overview of our research cycle. I think I'll pause there. I think that's probably enough. Any questions before we move into your introductions?
More time for questions along the way. So what we're going to do, we have these gorgeous cards on the floor, and they have values on them. We're going to ask you to take a moment. Prompt is up here as well. Choose 1 to 3 cards that kind of speak to one of your core values. It doesn't only need to be given your role on the board or given your role within MAUSD. It's like you as a human being, what are the values that drive you and the way you move through the world. So when we get our cards, we are going to ask you to go back to your seat, and then we'll go kind of just around and have you introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns if you want to share, and anything you'd want to share about your role and the values that you chose. All right?
Now, let's say you're looking at it when you get up and you look at this and you're like, knowledge, that's one of my values, but then Susanna sees knowledge. It's okay to say that that's still one of your values. You don't all have to, you can just notice where that card has gone and make note of it. So there's only one of each card, but if you see one, just make note of it. And if you don't see one that's not, if there's one that's one of your values that's not in that circle, name that as well. So come on into the circle and grab 1 to 3. It speaks to you. Go into a whole rationale about your values. But if you, like Susanna said, you can say your name, your pronouns if you'd like to share them, your role here today, and the values that you chose. Can I give it to you?
Sure.
Okay, and then here's this to Pat.
Oh, all right. I think this is the 3rd time today I've introduced myself to you all. So, Patrick Green, superintendent. My 9th year as superintendent here in MAUSD. When you mentioned before your why, that got wheels spinning for me. And I've told my story to some in the room, but when I thought about the value that I picked, so I picked success, and my connection to this and my why is, thinking about the role that school systems play in helping students achieve success or be successful. So I grew up in a single family household, a mother who had an 8th grade education, poor, all the challenges that come along with that, 7 kids. So statistically, success for me was unlikely. The school system I was in, along with supportive family, there are other factors, but a large factor was the school system I was in and the support that I got that helped me not sort of have that experience that many people in my shoes would have had growing into adulthood. So when I think about my why, that has always been my why. I know what my school system did for me, and that is always my motivation to what I want our school system to do for our students. I think we're passing this around, is that right?
Yes, please.
I chose honesty.
Can you tell us who you are?
Oh, I'm Liz Sayre, and I'm a school board member. And I chose honesty because it is not much of a test to tell the truth when things are going well or something's positive, but it's the crux of trust and progress, frankly, in any area, to be honest the whole way through, even when if it's something that doesn't want to be heard, and that can take a lot of courage and vulnerability and a lot of these other traits. But I feel like you can get to the point of moving forward with honesty.
I'm Kathy Apgar. I live in New Haven. I'm a board member. So I read that as go for the max. It said 1 to 3, so I chose 3. First and foremost, I chose passion, because those of you who know me and know how I speak, I am a very passionate person about a lot of things. And sort of like Patrick's background, that passion growing up as a female in the 50s and 60s was the only way I got the education that I wanted, because so many times in education, we were told you can't do what you want to do. You can't get the education you want because A, you're a girl, and B, you're a girl. So that passion carried me through to get the education that I wanted. And all along the way, I had parents and family and friends that reminded me that humor is the best medicine for all. And really, you can only play as hard as you work, and you can only work as hard as you play. So keep a smile, and all of these will work together for you.
Good job. Melissa Laurie, I am a school board member. So I picked integrity as my first one. And I'm just going to read the card because it resonates well with me. To adhere to a practice of honesty and of having your outer world reflect your inner world to be what you seem to be. I've always said with me, what you see is what you get. So that fit really well. And then the second was family, because first and foremost, I will always put my family first.
I'm Kylie. I'm a school board member, and I picked 3 because I thought I was supposed to. The first one is resilience, and I picked resilience because I feel like it's an important characteristic. To have true growth, you have to be resilient, right? You have to be okay with failing first. The next one is justice, and I think this is just inherent to me. I think this has been one of my life's themes, just born with it, making sure that everybody is represented and spoken for. And then the last one is vulnerability, and this kind of trickles down to trust for me. I feel like to be trusted in any capacity, but perhaps in this capacity we're all leaders in some sense. To be trusted as a leader, you have to be authentic, and to be authentic, you have to show your vulnerabilities and your weaknesses. And those are my 3.
I'm Erin Gibner. I'm the board chair, and I chose work ethic, mostly because Kathy stole all the other ones. No, just because it plays right into those. It plays right into those, right? You have to have the work ethic to do all those things. And then my other one is empathy. And I don't know if that's a crux or something I lean on too much, but that's one that's important for me.
Put that right there. Hi, I'm Justin Pearson. I'm on the school board. And I don't represent Moncton, but we represent MAUSD. Is that correct? Is that was okay? I chose 2 cards. One was leadership. At my 9-to-5 job, I am a leader in the company I work for, and I understand the value of leading a team, and especially where it comes from being a father in the family as well. Now with some shoes to fill on the school board, I kind of hope to lead that charge as well. And the other thing that I've gotten to a regular habit is gratitude. I love to tell people the impact they're leaving on me. What I'm grateful for our friendships or whether it be work relationships here, people, the bagger at the grocery store. I always like to pay respects in that way, so that resonates pretty well with me.
Hi, I'm Barb, Barb Crandall, and I'm a school board representative. And I chose creativity because that's what fuels me. I use my intuition to create and sustain harmony, which is where I'm most comfortable. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. All right, so I'm Mike Desch, a school board member. The first one I didn't choose, but somebody else, like-minded individual, chose curiosity. So thanks for doing that. For me, I think the world and the people that inhabit it is like such a big place. And with the curiosity as sort of your driver, you're going to explore what the world has to offer and all of the growth that comes with those new experiences and those new ideas. And then the one that I did snag was compassion, because I think for as valuable it is to explore for the sake of exploring, how you ultimately use that information, I think has to be informed by compassion. And so I think those two in conjunction drive a lot of my engagement with the world.
I'm Travis Parker. I'm a elementary school principal. I chose humility and simplicity. I think it's important for me in the work that I do, in being able to understand those that I work with and my students and others. So I think that's an important quality that resonates well with me. And I think the idea of simplicity is more of an idea. I think this is not a simple job, but it is something about just being able to come back to the importance of what this work is about and trying to refocus that piece of it and come from a place of learning and growth.
I'm Aaron Boynton, principal at Bristol Elementary. I chose purpose, which says to live life with meaning, intention, and direction. And I guess I chose this one because I think about, as I've chosen this profession, working with kids, just kind of like deep down at some level in my being, serves a greater purpose for humankind. And I guess I couldn't see living life without some purpose that is important. And then the other one I chose was patience. I've had to practice this, and I guess really over the years practice patience. I think if you don't have it in the profession of school administration, you won't last long. I want to read what it says on the card: to have the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without becoming upset. So I just think it's real important in our job to be patient, and I really try to practice that.
Hello, I'm Jason Rasco. I'm one of the assistant principals at Mount Abe. I had chosen 3. I have 2 cards with me, but first and foremost for me is gratitude. I'm always, start my day with my gratitude list, and very, very grateful for being on this side of the dirt. Any day is a good day. And my other 2, just for today, I was kind of reflecting about some of my favorite books. And 2 of my favorite books are The Fixer and The Road. And if you know those books, they're pretty dark if you read them. And but what they represent to me is there's a piece of hope in it. And it always kind of reminds me to be hopeful and optimistic and with a little bit of ambition, what in our jobs as leaders, and the heavy times, the hard times, it's always, hope is not something flowery or beautiful or anything. It's just a little opportunity. It's a piece. And if we can, be hopeful and optimistic and with a little ambition, we can work together and get through those hard times.
Katrina DiNapoli, still Assistant Superintendent. I shout out to honesty. That was right on the top of my list as well. Important for myself, and it also important to me that folks around me are their best selves when it comes to being honest and building trust. The card I chose is collaboration because I am most inspired, particularly in my work life, when there's a level of collaboration happening with and amongst my colleagues.
Thank you. I'm Erin Tebow. I'm one of the assistant principals at Mount Abe, and I chose growth. Having a growth mindset is extremely important, and I love to continue to change and learn and change some more and just hear everybody's perspective, and every day is a new day. And I just want to be my best every day, so that takes self-discipline in terms of setting those morning goals and trying to live up to those throughout the day so that I can continue to grow and evolve as a person.
My name is Beth McGeorge, and I'm the Director of Student Support Services. I chose 3, but I'll speak to 2. Excellence was one that I chose. Kind of a mantra in my house with my family is always do your best. And in this job, I ask myself every day, strive for excellence, always do your best, and always recognize in others when they're doing their best. So recognizing excellence in others. And then health, I think it's really important that we, as leaders, we model health in our mental health or physical health, and we constantly reflect upon, are we taking care of ourselves? I think that's really important.
I did choose 3. Sure, I forgot. I haven't met you yet. I'm Shannon Warden, pronouns she, her, and I am the principal at Mount Abe. But we were not there at the same time, and we were not at Otter Valley at the same time either. So I chose 3. Growing up, I was the youngest of 6, and I was always told that I was thin-skinned and that I needed to have more courage and be brave and, go out and do things. Perhaps my mom babied me a little bit. So I chose courage. My favorite quote growing up was a John Wayne quote, courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. And so that has always resonated with me, and I look at the number of our students that come to school every day with courage to show up, and days that it takes courage for me to show up. So that one was really important to me. And the other 2 kind of go together, and one is social connections, to prioritize relationships with other people, and inclusiveness, a sense of belonging for all. And so I think that those relationships and forming different types of relationships to contribute to our lives, whether it's our personal lives or our professional lives within our learning communities, so that everybody feels that they are part of something bigger and connected with other people.
Mike Lansing, principal at Moncton. I have two, but I chose three. First one's fun. I think going to school and not enjoying yourself is silly, especially when you're between the ages of 5 and 11. School should be fun. The second one is order. I try to make my schools very ordered and structured and organized. The kids know what to do and know where to go and whatnot. And the last one is respect, which is I didn't grab, but I was an administrator in 2 different minority majority schools. And there's like the disciplinarian who was white. Usually the way I got across to kids who looked really different from me was like respect. And so I've kind of held on to that. And even my little 5-year-olds, I show respect in ways, and up to all the way to 11 to the staff. So I hold on to that pretty strongly.
Andy Weiss, principal at Robinson, and I walked in a little bit late, so I quickly grabbed curiosity right out of Mike's hands. And so curiosity, and then vulnerability and hope are really the 3 things that I think about, and those 3 for me are like the trilogy of growth and belonging. I think if you have those 3, you can do anything. So, thanks.
And for me, I'm one of the assistant principals at Bristol Elementary School. I chose kindness, like Mike said. If you're in an elementary school, like this is kind of like, as a classroom teacher, that was my number 1 thing. Like we're gonna be kind to each other. And now that I work with adults a lot more, like things are hard and we still just need to be kind to each other. So that's kind of what I try to do. And the other is risk-taking. And I think on the back here it says, consider that risks often lead to new and important paths. So like, yeah, be kind, but like sometimes we have to take some risks and we gotta make some changes and do things differently.
Thank you all so much for your generosity and sharing and your vulnerability and sharing. I feel more connected to you as a human, and I feel like, you know, you're starting from your strengths as a team, like the diversity of values and gifts that you bring to this community is super important. Thank you, Lindsay, for capturing them down. We won't do circle rounds, but I mean, we have 2 questions here just for food for thought. You know, what values did you hear that are shared? There definitely were some, and there were points of connection. Which of our values are similar, and think about, you know, what would it mean to be able to start from those places and work from those places. And how do our values support the work that you do? Some of you spoke to that, some of you spoke to your upbringing, your time as a youth. I think it's really important. For us, we don't have any of our youth program specialists here today just because of availability, but normally that's a practice. And just thinking about what it would mean to have youth here, thinking and listening to and sharing their values in this work as well. And how can we approach our work together so it reflects these values and draws upon them?
Maybe we could just like, if you have a reflection, yeah, we won't have time for a full circle, but reflecting on this activity and how it might contribute to your work together.
While some of the values seem different, there is definitely an interconnectedness between all of them.
I feel like just by virtue of doing this exercise, which I've done in different manners before, but if you think about it, at least for me, I feel uplifted already just by watching and listening to everybody's story, and I believe that's the authenticity of that connection between human beings. It's listening. Yeah, that. Yes. It's good, it's good.
Yeah, I think that they were all positive, but as we chose them, they were individualized for who we were. But I think the strength is when all these cards come together and create one kind of superpower.
This is something that we do as a foundation with all of our teams, starting with values, right? I mean, I think sometimes values can become a politicized word, but it's not. Like, right, you learn a lot about each person's story, their experience with their work, with the world. And then, like you said, I think that's a beautiful way to say it, is when you put them all together, it becomes a superpower. And it becomes a foundation of the work for whoever we're working with in communities. And it allows people to see each other in different ways too. So maybe you didn't know that about each other. Maybe you know each other very well, but I'm guessing probably not, because I remember there's a lot of new board members and you're got the leadership team and board together. So it might have given you some insight into someone sitting next to you that you didn't have before. So thank you for introducing yourself that way.
One thing I'll add too when it comes to thinking about equity, right? Power dynamics exist in every single space. There are power dynamics in here, many of which are visible to me. And like starting with values is such a beautiful thing, because regardless of power dynamics, right, every single person in the room has an entry point. We all have values, none of us exist without them. So right from the jump, in a room where there's power dynamics at play that often stifle conversation or like do all sorts of other kinds of things that impede progress and collaboration, starting from a place where we all can participate equitably is like a really, it's a way to keep each other whole in a time when you might risk the opposite.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we want to do another activity with you, and then I promise we will get to kind of like what this could look like if you were to partner with us. But we always start, as I shared, our why, what, and how. The why is really centered in our shared values. But we start with this activity because we think it's fundamental to understand really the dynamics of moving a community forward and thinking about youth and adults working differently together in a community. So we're going to do this in kind of a speedy version, but it offers you some time to do a minute reflection, so that's the speedy part. You can either reflect in your brain, write, or draw, whatever works best for you. We want you to think about a time that a decision was being made, you knew you had some input, some ideas to offer, but your insights were not asked for. No one asked for your input. It was not solicited. And therefore, the decision ended up being done to and for you. Bring that experience to life in your mind or on paper right now. Just really find one, and like as clear as you can get it. One experience, not like, well, this happens to me all the time at this place. Like, get this one story, this movie in your head in this next minute. So give you a minute to think about that experience where something is being done to or for you. You were not asked for input, not asked for your ideas. Great. Okay, now you've got your picture. How did that make you feel? And so think about that experience. How did you actually feel? What are the feeling words that come up? And we don't need to share the story. We're just going to share some words. We're not even going to write those words down because those are trash. They'll go in the trash pile, delete, because we're going to do something else. But just tell me, how did that feel in that? How did you feel? You can just shout it out.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable, thank you.
Disenfranchised.
Oh.
Disenfranchised.
Disenfranchised, thank you.
Disrespected.
Thank you. Did you say unvalued? Thank you.
Forgot.
Thank you.
Angry.
Mm-hmm.
Frustrated.
Thank you.
Overwhelmed.
Thank you.
Misunderstood.
Thank you. Any other final feelings? Those are not great feelings to have, right? They don't feel good in your body, they don't feel good in your mind. And so we start here, not because we want you to feel bad. We're going to switch to a feel good moment. But we want us to be really clear about what it feels like as a young person in schools where typically, not everywhere, but typically things are done to and for you. And as adults in school, sometimes things are done to and for you in regards to decision making in our jobs, in our professional life. So that gives us a first kind of experience around that why. Why do we need to make this shift right now? Because those feelings don't feel very good. So if we can identify that story and those feelings, then let's think about this scenario. So same idea, but this time a decision was being made. You knew you had something to offer as far as the decision, and your input was solicited. So someone asked for your ideas, suggestions, advice. So the decision was being done with you rather than to and for you. Brings that one example to life in your mind. As you bring that experience to life, now think about how you felt. And this time maybe we'll just do a quick whip around and capture a word or two. There's no you don't have to, go for the max, whatever comes to mind. A word or two of how you felt when your ideas were asked for and you contributed to a decision in some way. The with model. Maybe value. You get to decide which way you're passing it, left or right. Go. Relieved.
I think it really depends on the circumstances, like for both of these, because I have positive and negative feelings about both of them. Because sometimes you need a little structure and stability where it's lacking, and that's helpful. And sometimes, So and then in this, So I like these questions feel both of them overwhelming. So that's where I'm at.
So I'm going to say overwhelming is a fair word to add there because it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Included.
Thank you. I'll be the runner.
Patrick's taken my word twice.
You can say the same
I'll say
word.
empowered.
Empowered.
Humanized.
Validated.
It's okay, someone says your word.
Purposeful.
Worthy.
Worthy. Hey, 1 second. Just so we can purposeful, worthy.
Stealing your word.
Go for it, Gina.
Heard.
Heard.
Grateful.
Grateful.
Grateful. Clarity.
Clarity.
Respected.
Useful.
Happy.
Wanted.
Nothing else is coming to mind.
You can repeat or just ditto.
Ditto.
Okay.
I'm kind of feeling the same. I'll say comfortable.
Great. Did everyone share? We got everyone? Okay. All right. So I appreciate also that we're not asking for everyone to just give us the rosy picture too. Often when we do this with a youth adult team, there will be feelings like anxious, overwhelmed, confused, because for young people especially, it's not often that this happens, right? In our society and the way our power structures are in our different systems, it's not often that they're asked for their input in decision making, especially big systems change decision making. So this is where we want to center ourselves. We want people to feel valued, wanted. We want people to feel clear, grateful, useful, included, comfortable, empowered, heard, humanized, purposeful, worthy, respected, validated, and overwhelmed at times, right? Like, it's okay to have both kinds of emotions, right? Because that can be leading to some growth in a certain way. And this is an activity that we do for our teams in order to find their why. This is where we build our agreements, this is where we build our kind of norms together as a group so that we can be constantly checking in on these different pieces of our work together. So thank you for engaging in that. So now we'll get to the vision. It sounds like you've had some conversations about Portrait of a Graduate, strategic thinking, community engagement projects. It doesn't, I can tell you a little bit about I told you where it started. There's really no difference between Portrait of a Learner, Portrait of a Graduate. I think Learner sometimes is more inclusive in that we're thinking about pre-K through 12 beyond, and Graduate sometimes gets really focused on, getting kids through high school, right? So, yeah.
We haven't really talked much about Portrait of a Graduate or Portrait of a Learner.
Perfect. Okay, so we could dive in. No assumptions. Great. We have had the opportunity to work with many different districts in Vermont on similar projects where the school board and leadership have seen that it's going to be much more valuable and probably long-lasting, sustainable if we take some time to really engage the full community in thinking about what are the skills, attributes, characteristics that we want all of our learners to have in their toolbox as they move through a district, as they move through MAUSD, and when they graduate. So some people call it a Portrait of a Graduate, some people call it a Portrait of a Learner, but it really becomes the centerpiece and the vision for all of the work that then happens afterwards. So the portrait, and we'll explain that process, becomes the vision for then the board and the community to then set the goals, the strategic goals for 3 to 5 years beyond that, based on that vision. But the vision is really becomes amplified by the community, and every member of the community having a say in what they really feel is most valuable for each of the learners in their system. So when you're thinking about a refreshed vision or refreshed strategic plan or framework, it's really a great first step to find that centerpiece, that kind of North Star for your work, because you can always go back to that portrait, and we'll explain what that is a little more. We'll give you some examples. The portrait, when you are thinking about, is this the right next step for our district? And then, yeah, please.
30 seconds to further contextualize sort of what brought you here today. As we worked over the course of this year with the district advisory council that was just launched this year, we're really digging into the strategic plan and thinking about what that update needs to look like, because this past year was our last year of our 5-year plan. And simultaneously, the conversations I mentioned before that the board's had over the years around this sort of struggle with the ends and that work, combined with the struggles we've had with finances and thinking about merger, don't merge, consolidate schools, don't consolidate schools, the convergence of kind of all of these things became clear sort of early spring, I would say, that kind of a reset that brings all of those sort of ideas and concerns and challenges and aspects into some focus. Like if we can reset our purpose and be really clear as a community, not just as a board, not just as a leadership team, but as a community, what is it we want? That drives our strategic plan. That drives conversations about merge, don't merge, close schools, don't close schools. Like recentering on our why to kind of connect to our activity before as a community seemed like a foundational piece of work that needed to be redone in light of where we are now relative to 8 years ago when we started building the last version of the strategic plan. And as we talked more with Up for Learning and talked with other districts about this kind of work, it seemed to kind of check a lot of those boxes that were needed for us. So I just thought I'd offer that additional context as to why we're here.
So I think that you captured everything that's on here, so I'm gonna move us forward to the why, right?
Yeah, and I think, that was a beautiful segue in the sense of, I think it can be sometimes hard, right, to witness the great work that's been done and then to experience a sense of, wait, are we just starting over? Are we starting from scratch? And it's, I think, really important for us of like, no, like this is a moment to build upon and draw out the strengths and also bring more authentic youth voice into that process. Because we know, like you said, Lindsay, that's what's needed to sustain the work. There's a mantra in the disability rights movement around like nothing should be about us without us. And school is fundamentally about youth, but oftentimes youth are not welcome to be true partners. And I think it sounds like from talking with you and Katrina, past iterations and pushback if this doesn't feel right, past work in this realm has attempted to really bring in youth, but perhaps hasn't really been as successful as you'd like to be in drawing on youth-adult partnership. And that is kind of the bread and butter of Up for Learning, and that's what makes this work equitable, right? If we're trying to serve our students, they need to be there at the table telling us about their experiences. And likewise, our adult partners as well, and our educators need to be at the table telling about their experiences and have that bridge that's often not created. I'm gonna pass this around. We don't have this slide, but we have a continuum called Seed to Tree at UP, where in the most traditional spaces, youth are seen as sort of passive recipients. Education's done to them without any opportunity to kind of be agents and weigh in. And we see that, throughout the process of creating youth-adult partnership, which isn't always linear also, it's okay to be in all of these spaces in a healthy, biodiverse orchard, that, we want to create more opportunities where youth are seen as partners, true partners. So I'll pass that around. But we think that, this is an opportunity to build on the work that's been done to create a refresh, create a portrait of a learner with youth at the table. So we'll explain kind of that model, but that's the why. Anything you want to add?
No, I think we can just kind of explain the model, and that will, and you can see at the end, at the bottom of the slide, it says 2 to 3 MAUSD youth will work with Up for Learning staff to co-facilitate the project. So what we don't have here today is our youth, and we always co-facilitate with youth. But in this case, we really want to build youth leadership in your own district, and that's something that we really strive to do everywhere we go. So we would think about like, who are 2 or 3 young people, not talking about, it could be any kind of leader. Leadership exists in many different forms. And we might say a middle school and high school. Maybe 2, it could be 4, it doesn't have to be 2 to 3. But we want to build your own leadership within your district. So we would be compensating youth to be working side by side with us to plan and facilitate the retreats that would be happening throughout this process. So we're building your own capacity, because what we hope for at Up for Learning is that we support, we facilitate, we hold the work for you, we move the work forward, we build resources. That's our strength as facilitators, but our job is also to build your capacity so you don't need Up for Learning for the rest of the existence of MAUSD, so that you have systems in place to be able to continue this work forward into the future. And so it starts in the summer now to fall, and it would begin with starting to plan with a core planning team, which would exist of those maybe 2 to 4 youth, and leadership and educators, like whomever you identify as part of this core planning team, but a small core planning team. So who's really going to hold kind of the work for the district and work side by side with UP. And then we would offer the youth some facilitation training where they would learn the skills that they would need to facilitate this work side by side with us. And then in the fall, whenever, we would have 2 retreats where we start building our Portrait of a Graduate or Portrait of a Learner team, and that team is much larger. That team is youth and adults from all the schools in MAUSD, families, caregivers, school board members, community partners. I mean, it's not 100 people, but it might be like 30 people all together in a space as a Portrait of a Learner team. But it's representative of the entire community so that they can go out and then capture the voices of their smaller communities. So that's kind of part 1. And during those first 2 retreats, we do a lot of work around, I'm going to grab our whole scope of work, but we do a lot of work around, 1, finding their why, youth adult partnership, building the foundation of this work, but then we also, and building those relationships, we help them understand what the YPAR cycle is all about, Youth Participatory Action Research, how we're going to use data to drive change in this process. And then we go through what we call a SOAR process, strengths, opportunities, aspirations, results. Many of you probably have heard of that process before. That's the kind of data we want to collect. We want to know about the strengths, the opportunities for change, the aspirations, and the results. What are the characteristics that are the most important in an MAUSD learner or graduate? And so that would be setting the stage for data collection. And data collection would then occur in the fall. In between these 2 things, there's an opportunity, Katrina and Patrick had shared, that there's an opportunity to present this work, that whole team could come and present this work to the full in-service, the district-wide in-service. That's, again, making sure that people understand this is a with model and that we want people to be engaged in this work, we want them to support the work, and we're looking for everyone's help in collecting as much data as possible. So that team would be able to come and mobilize their whole community at that in-service. Data collection then happens, it happens in lots of different ways. So when you think data, sometimes we think like numbers, and it can be numbers, quantitative, but it's also qualitative. And it's not just surveys. So there might be community events that are already happening in their individual communities where, like for instance, I'm thinking of one of our districts, one of their first data collection events was at the polling places because it just happened to be like today, or maybe it was not primary, and they started collecting data right there. They had a QR code and they were asking people a couple questions, and they started collecting data from the full community. It could also be at community-wide dinners, events, performances. The idea is to build it in, to bake it into things that are already happening in your community so that we can touch as many people as possible. Even if they're not connected to the school, we're all connected to the schools. Right? I mean, I'm not sure many of you obviously have connections to the school, but even if I'm, someone who just moved to this town, I still have a connection to my school. These are the people, the youth in our town and our educators. So we would build in a really strong plan to collect data throughout the fall and winter. We then hold a data analysis retreat where and let me just say, because sometimes people ask, well, how are you going to capture data from like pre-K 2? Like how's that look? So what we've done in the past is we've done data collection through picture drawing, and for our really early literacy, like having people write, I dream of a school where, and then we look at those for themes, and we really look at each of the pictures and look at themes. So there's a way for every single developmental stage to be engaged in data collection. So whether it's through visuals, through surveys, through chalk talk events and dialogues to collect data, and then narrowing it down to themes, there's a way for everyone to engage. And then, so we have our data analysis. We then take that and synthesize it into a report that makes it a little more digestible. And then there's a final team retreat where we would come back together and we'd think about how do we now want to present this information back to the community, and also what is our vision for, like, in the sense of a portrait of a graduate or a portrait of a learner, sometimes it has a visual component to it, and we'll share that with you in a moment. What do we want the visual to be? So some of our districts have then brought in a graphic designer to work side by side with the youth adult team to really capture the vision of their data. And then we would celebrate through community dialogue events, and that would then lead to strategic planning, because you would have your vision. Pause there, because that was a lot of a process, but you can see it does take to do it really well. We've done it in shorter time spans too. Like, we worked with OSSD on a much shorter time frame, and it was great. But I think to capture the most voices and to really be as inclusive and equitable as possible, we've seen the most success when we can do it over pretty much a full academic year with celebrations in the spring.
And you said too earlier that I think is helpful that a lot of times this work is like a ripple, and I imagine that, there's sort of concentric circles where when we're building capacity, it's like the tightest knit circle, right? The core planning team, and we're building the youth facilitation up, and then we're expanding, right? We're going into the community, we're collecting data, we're interfacing with each other, and then towards the end, right, we've reached this, the process has been really impactful, and then we've also got now a tangible outcome that can be shared broadly with everybody.
And there's a really strong communications element of this too, in that it becomes like, the community knows about this because it's out there. The team has developed a communication strategy and plan to make sure everyone's aware that this is there. This is there for their voices, and they've tried to think about all the spaces and places where they could capture people's ideas. Any questions about that?
I have one broad question.
Yeah.
So I would really like the vision and the inclusiveness of this approach. But I guess I was wondering if you would comment a little bit on where expertise comes into play. Right, so you're asking a lot of members of the community, students of all ages, to weigh in on really big questions, oftentimes where they don't actually have information to base their beliefs, their opinions, their recommendations on. Right, so how do you balance the really important work of bringing everybody to the table, but also making sure that those that have the expertise, those that have the information about this district, about this community, also have a prominent voice and can filter through the community so that it's a productive dialogue, as opposed to just sort of a free-for-all, not to be too simple.
Yeah, well, the bigger piece is that we use a lot of protocols for dialogue, so that there is that, it's really structured in a way that we have productive, open dialogue. But we're also not asking questions for people to weigh in on, what do you think about, we're asking the big questions. What do you want all learners to know and be able to do? What is important to you? Everyone has experienced school, right? So we all are experts in some way in school. Now, not everyone's an educator. Not everyone is a parent, not everyone's an administrator, but we all have kind of a common ground. We've all been in school, right? Whether that experience has been good, bad, or in between, we can bring that to life. And we really try to ask people to bring curiosity. We're not bringing agendas, right? We're not bringing, this is my laundry list of things that I want to talk about, because that's not what we're doing here. We're going towards the North Star. So we're going to leave the laundry list aside, and we're really going to focus in on that North Star, because then we can say, does that laundry list align with the North Star now? Because we've now asked 2,000 people, what they think, and this is what the data says. And that's why employing data to drive change is so important. But people have to be part of that data. They have to be asked. So when you have data, it really centers equity, because you're not just saying, we decided we want to do this. We're saying, this is what the community wants. So I think when we're really focusing on big picture visioning, you lose a lot of that. It softens the process a lot, so people show up in a very different way. And I would say, when youth and adults are sitting side by side, people show up in a very different way. And I just think that our skill, our expertise as facilitators, is that we create that space. that container for these hard conversations, for people to have engaging dialogue with each other, to have fun, to feel joy, to feel good about the work. So that's our job and our expertise. Yes, you all are the experts of your community. That's what we hope for. Well, maybe not, but I mean, you are. You're a part of the community. So you're the experts on your community. Your lived experience is really important. But what we do is we create the structures in the space, the container, to make sure that it's really what we say is a brave space, a safe space. Yeah.
And I'd say too, in looking at this, a lot of reactions I've seen sometimes, which may or may not resonate with you at all, I'm not projecting that onto you. A lot of times people be like, it's really scary to think about, like, I don't think it's right, for youth to be making decisions that they don't have the experience, the long range perspective, the history to maybe be making. And I think it's really important to know that youth adult partnership is not the same as Harry, Frank, one of our colleagues often says, it's not even the same as equality. And a lot of times youth that I've worked with aren't seeking to make all of the decisions, and in fact that can be a really scary place to be.
Totally.
Is to be told to make decisions that you are not qualified to make. So I think that's really important, and part of the process on the timeline for building capacity is supporting an understanding of youth adult partnership, of one where we are sharing our perspectives and our lived experience and the expertise that everyone does have to offer, but it doesn't necessarily mean like totally destabilizing how decisions get made. It just means destabilizing power sharing and who gets the microphone and who gets to be heard, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
This might be too logistical, but I'm just thinking of the power of this community, but also the variety of voices that are within this community, and how you make sure to bring all those voices to the table, and particularly those that are disenfranchised, families or students that have been marginalized over time, in particular after it took 3 tries to get a budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So good question. Yes. Understood. Yeah. It's not. You're not an anomaly in our state and in our country, right? So just know that, and that should feel okay too. Like that. This is a reality for many of our communities, right? And people ask the same question. And I think what's really unique about the way in which we go about our work is that it's youth and adults side by side doing this work. It's asking youth that are not typically at the table to be part of this work. It's asking adults that are not typically part of this work to be part of this work. So we really, really work hard, and we ask, we lean on you all to think about how do we create the most representative team so that we can really touch all those different communities and people that have been disenfranchised, that are not feeling good about the schools, or just not about whatever it is, X, Y, and Z, and therefore they're not feeling good about the budget, right? And that's the reality for our state and for a lot of schools we work with across the country. And so what I think is really powerful about this work is that, are we going to capture everyone's voice? No, that would be like really like rose, like that's never going to happen, but I think you're going to get as many people involved as possible. And we keep saying, well, we haven't heard from this part of the community. How can we ensure that we get their voices? Who lives in that neighborhood, or who lives in that community or that part and maybe wants to go and like put up a little QR code at the grocery store, or maybe just set up a little table and ask people at a town meeting or whatever what they think about whatever the questions are, to keep it as simple as possible too. We're not asking people for long surveys and data. We're keeping it pretty succinct in many ways so that people have the time and energy to do it. But what I hear is like, yeah, there's likely this is not unlike most communities. But I think there's a shift in the way people show up and the energy when young people and adults are working in this type of way, particularly if you're very thoughtful about who's on that team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add, having been an adult partner at Otter Valley, just like how important it feels to be asking the question that you asked. Like, it's an essential, beautiful question. you won't get at a portrait of a learner that represents your community without asking that question every time you gather. Like, who's here? Great. Who's not here? How do we, it takes a lot of creative problem solving and honesty. I'm thinking about like the willingness to be like, this is us, but it's only part of us. So how in the next retreat are we gonna make sure we're getting there? So UP is really, really good at that creative problem solving and coaching piece, but there is, like, this is a partnership too, where I think it's really awesome that so many principals are here today, because I think often principals and the adult partners who are in the school tend to be really great thought partners for who is represented. How do you gather a group of youth who aren't only the group of youth who feel belonging enough to step forward and volunteer? What about the youth who are maybe not compliant or are super wriggly or aren't asked because, you know, for whatever series of reasons, or they don't have enough trust there. But there's so many opportunities, and it's exciting to get creative and to meet that need.
Right, and that gets at the customization and co-designing with you all. And the other aspect that I should talk about is, like, when they're going back and collecting data, it's peer-to-peer. So there's youth going into advisories or youth going into classrooms, and they're thinking about, they're doing the activities that we did. We're kind of training the trainers in some way to go back and do those activities with their peers. They can do it at a faculty meeting. They can do it at a community event. So there's lots of different layers of it. And when it's their peers doing this with them, and it's not just, you know, someone saying, click on the Google form and do this. It's an activity. It's, you know, their peers are there. There's a really different energy. So it's not a utopia, right? But it's a really important question. And it might be a form of healing for your community too. I'm not guaranteeing, but it could be a way when you're bringing people together like this around a common question, a common, you know, really thinking about, I mean, back to that values piece. It could be a way to do some healing together.
Can I ask a start endpoint question? Like, I guess the first one was like, why are we doing this? Is the community so mad at us that we feel like this is the reason? Are we being forced to do this? Is this Patrick's idea? And then I think my next, just kind of curious. Then my next one is, at the end of this, like, we have a portrait to learn, and then we implement it. And then what if they have things that, like, is, I think, to your expert agree, like, I have these concerns, like, what if they're like, we shouldn't do science? What if they say, like, phones should be allowed in all classes? Like, I don't know, like, I wonder where that looks, and how that, having never done it, not really sure why we're doing it, like, I wonder how much weight and power does an 11-year-old have on the shaping of an 18?
Well, I'm just gonna, like, repeat what I heard from you and what I've heard in our conversations, is that the why is the strategic plan is wrapping up, and it's time for, and it's old, right? Like, 8 years ago, what was set out, 8 or 5?
8 years ago we started the process.
Okay. There has been a lot of change in 8 years, a lot of change, and for all of us and our learners, right? And so it's time, right? It's time, and it sounds like, based on this question, like, the community clearly has, you know, some feelings about school and about their community, about their life, and about whatever's going on. So why not do a refresh, kind of bringing people together in a new way, saying, hey, it's time for us to really reimagine that vision for our district. There's a lot of questions that came up, and we're going to put that, you know, like, what happened during voting happened during voting. We're moving forward. Schools are opening soon, right? And so I think the why is clear. Like, it's time. Like, it's time for a refresh, and it's time to do it with the full community. And the community probably has changed in 8 years, I'm guessing. I don't know. I'm just filling in.
The only thing I would add to that is I think we know we have hard decisions to make ahead of us, just from a sustainability standpoint, et cetera. So to have a refreshed why to lean on as we make decisions, like, does this decision best support our why? Or does that decision best support our why? seems really critical. And I think it is also true, the notion of trust and disenfranchised, et cetera, as we went through this really difficult budget cycle, surfaced repeatedly. So as we were talking in our meeting before this, the value of the process and the healing as a community that takes place is as valuable as the product that is the portrait of a learner that informs the ends that drives decisions we make as an organization. So it's that process-product combination that, with the timing of the ending of the strategic plan, difficult budget times, needing to make some decisions about what our future is going to look like, that all kind of culminated in this more comprehensive and time-consuming. That's a reality. Like, this will take longer than just dusting off the strategic plan and putting a new cover on it. But the process product benefit seemed to justify the extended time.
This process isn't that different from what we did 8 years ago to get to the strategic plan. It just took us 3 years to do it, which, because we were running it sometimes had its fits and starts, lost momentum, got the momentum back up again. We had lots and lots of voices, but not nearly the amount of youth voice that you're talking about. So I think this is different in that way, and having the support of your expertise and facilitation will help us be partners and participants in the work more than trying to do that, as well as facilitate and keep it going and deal with all the other competing priorities that are going to be happening along the way. So to me, this is very similar to how we came up with what we have. And when we met with the District Advisory Council, as Patrick said, this past year to revamp, revise, do part 2 to this, it was pretty clear that we are all kind of not really choir members necessarily, because we had some deep conversations, but we're just batting around the same ideas. We need some fresh thoughts, fresh thinking, fresh ideas, and there aren't students on that committee either.
And it was going to take us 5 years to refresh the strategic plan at the rate we were going.
Yeah,
so.
we're getting into a T in this track, and I'm a detail person, and it was too much. So that helps with the why. That's where I'm.
And we talked about all this through with that District Advisory Council, and there was extreme interest, I would say, is how I describe it. Beth and actually Mike and Beth and Katrina are all on that. That was my take. That they felt like conceptually, obviously we didn't get way into the details, but conceptually this all made great sense to that pretty representative group as well.
I just want to lift up what you said about knowing the why, and also 8 years is a long time for a community to lose the thread. I would imagine that you all are privy, and because of your responsibilities, you hold more of the long view of this district than perhaps an 8th grader does, or someone in the community might. Maybe that's not true, but I think it's really healthy over 8 years, right? And over time to take opportunities to re-story things, to make sure that our stories are the same, or that we're building a story together and coming from a shared place. Because to your point, right, I've seen districts that have portraits of a learner or things like them, like really clear representative visions about where we're going together, survive and even sometimes thrive through significant disruption and challenge. Disruptions that come from things like the budget just being totally upended, right? If you have an anchor to go back to filter through your decisions, it makes things not easy but easier. And similarly with things that come up that bring people to the school board in droves, right? When people are upset, when they feel hurt, when they feel a pain point, confused, anger, it's a moment to go back to the youth and the adults who created the vision and say, this is who we are, so that we don't combust under pressure, to be really frank. And I've seen that, and I think it's really wise.
Yeah, and I think just to get at okay, what is this? It's not, you're not, there's gonna be no surprises that when a community thinks about what they care most about, this is from Lamoille South Supervisory Union, this is their final design. So this is the stamp of their vision. They believe that every graduate should be an effective communicator, resilient and healthy, a creative problem solver, responsible and compassionate, a lifelong learner, and courageous and confident. That's what came up in their vision. And then from there, so we're not seeing like, get rid of the arts, like that's not in there. We're not getting to that. We're getting at these big ideas. And then from there, this is where, they kind of further defined what it would be, an effective communicator. Students of all ability levels can clearly demonstrate their learning, feelings, needs, and goals. What does that look like pre-K? What does that look like at 2nd grade? What does that look like at 4th grade, 6th grade, senior year? That's how you then build your, the learning around it. And as a board, this is how you build your strategic vision or your framework for your strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years around this vision. And so that's just an example of what one district landed on through an extensive amount of data collection and then design work with the team to come up with what it looks like. And from there, that was just the launching point, because then the board went back and worked together to develop their refreshed strategic plan. We helped to support that facilitation. Members of that team helped to support that facilitation. And then from there, it's kind of the next iteration is their superintendent, Ryan Harity, has now designed, co-designed with us a structure to ensure that there is youth adult partnership, youth voice at every school. So they have 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, 3 elementary schools, I think 3, in their district, and or SU. And they now, every school has a student adult advisory board, and Ryan or leadership meets with that board every month to ensure that they are really thinking about these different components and digging into their own school data, their own school questions and issues that are coming up. So they've really created some structures for this to be sustainable. They've built the capacity, and they've really reimagined what it could look like. So that's just one example. I want to make sure that we are being sensitive to time. We only have 5 more minutes, I think. So we've done, similar work like this in many districts across the state. We'll share these slides with you, but we've done a number of Portrait of a Learner, Portrait of a Graduate projects. We've done work with Winooski School District, the Anti-Racism Steering Committee. I think we're going into our 4th or 5th year with that group. That's a full community-wide effort. The youth had put forth these anti-racist demands in 2020 to their school board. The school board accepted 6 of the 8 demands. They've been working side by side, youth and adults, on implementing those demands. And those demands are those, you want to talk about reimagining a system, that is really reimagining. And then just our work around engaging families as well has been really an important component of our work. And that was a lot of talking. So we want to turn it to you and for any questions or wonderings.
I imagine you've done this in multiple ways. So one idea going on in my mind, and I think you may have said it earlier about, refresh, reboot, all those things, and honor the work that has brought us to where we are now. And so I'm imagining that some of the data collection for this representative leadership team would be really looking at our existing and also looking at our existing transferable skills. Like when I see something like what you just showed from Lamoille South, I think, wow, we could package what we already have in a way that's more user-friendly and in bite-sized pieces. We don't have to reinvent the wheel completely from scratch. And also, even those documents and some of those pieces could use a revamp in some way, shape, or form. And other people, other voices who didn't have an opportunity to give input to those things should be sought for. But I'm imagining you kind of not like throwing the baby out and all that, and also not getting stuck in the reason why we did that was, which kind of happened with the strategic plan work this year with that team was, why are we rewriting it? It's already in here. Right? It's like, so a little bit of both.
And it's a process piece,
This is something along those lines that's a little different that I think is important. Over the last few years, with all the concepts of possible change, et cetera, we've surveyed a lot of folks in the community in a lot of different ways. So a lot of that may still be relevant as well. So honoring information you gathered from
Yes.
the community in the past as well. to build on.
Yeah, current data, I mean, data that you already have is a foundation too, right? And then looking at what else do we need in order to make this, to get to this vision.
Because I do imagine there's like a constituent group that are like, why are you asking this again?
Yes.
You've asked me this question every other year, and I ask you this question.
Yeah, let's look at the data you have.
Right.
Some communities don't have the
Are you gonna do something
data.
with it this time?
Right.
Because you asked me last time and I didn't see anything happen.
Right.
Well, that answers my question about the input question. Like, just because I feel good that you asked me for it, how good am I going to feel when you don't use it? That's
Right.
a different question.
Well, that's where I mean, I really think that like this is a partnership in a really big way, and you being honest with the resistance that you may or may not feel, or the ways that you aren't bought in, is really important, so we can problem solve and use our expertise to inform it, and you can inform us about like, this is what resonates for our community. I've seen it so many times, right? It's almost like, I think there's so much dysregulation amongst adults who work in schools and youth who attend schools, right? That the idea of like one more thing is, I'll even use the word triggering. Like, I have seen people just really lose it over the idea of like one more thing, right? So it's really, really important that school leaders have worked through the resistance that comes up for us as we do it, so that we can partner with people to help them through the resistance that will inevitably come up. It is understandable, and yet this work works. So I think, yeah, just like bring it on, and the great work that you've done is really, really important to be able to check in and say, hey, you know, does this still resonate with you? What about it resonates? Hey, you who we haven't consulted before, does this represent you? Does this resonate with you, right? And I think that's a way to build credibility, right? One of the things is about, are you actually listening, is a lack of follow through. So this is a moment where you as MAUSD can build credibility by saying, hey, we actually have done all this great work. Now we're following up. We want to see if it still resonates. So it's really just that ability to kind of paint that picture for people to build trust.
We had a question.
Can you give some examples of some of the like concrete changes that have come out of the work that you've done? Like after you make all these visions and everybody's kind of on the same page and
Yeah.
relationship, like how does school look different?
Yeah, well, in this, I'm going to speak to this like portrait of a learner, this visioning process, because it's different than a lot of our other work that we do. I will say this process actually started in, I think it was 2019 with Milton Town School District. There was a new superintendent, and the school board was operating from the continuous improvement plan, but not a strategic plan. And a strategic plan is what's guiding you towards that North Star. So they had asked us to come in. We had a full youth adult team representative, elementary, middle, and high school. And what they ended up doing was they created basically their vision for learning in their district. That was in 2019, I think it was 2018, 2019. And that has been what has driven everything in all of their schools, was around that vision for learning. And so what it might look like is when they think about the professional learning that they're doing, that kind of drives the professional learning. When they're thinking about curricular choices and pedagogical choices, that drives it. So they're constantly going back to it, and it looks different at different stages and phases. But that was like one that really launched a lot of continuous work. Like they've done a lot of work around restorative practices in school and their social emotional learning work. Student voice became a big part of that too. So now they have a big student voice component. Their equity work was really driven by that too, and how that shaped different choices within the school. That's pretty broad, but I will say, back to LSSU, because that one's really fresh in my brain. I know that what they did was, now what they're doing is their curriculum coordinator was on the Portrait of a Graduate team, and she's worked with students and adults to then really define what does effective communication look like. So what are we looking for as far as targets and the the proficiencies for this, and then aligning the work they already had done, because they also had done a lot of work too, aligning that work with those so that you can see this is how it matches here, and you really create more justification and more just a connected, integrated system so that it's all kind of woven together. So they've really looked at, and then I think it takes some relief off of educators' backs too, because you're working towards this. You're not working to complete this, this guide of curriculum, right? Like we're doing this math and it's related to this, and that's how it's integrated into the bigger picture. So they've worked to really align their curriculum, their proficiency scales with the work. And then again, now they have these student advisory councils at each of their schools that work with the leadership. And I mean, so those are some examples, but it can change practice, policy, you know, and also just get more buy-in from, I think, from educators too, because it's kind of, they can see how it's woven into this one thing. And I know you all are already doing work. You've got the Dave Melnick work, you've got your math work that you've been doing, the All Learners, you've got PBIS. Those all fit into this, right? So it's not another added piece, it's how do we weave those things together.
I think one of the last pieces we're speaking about is guaranteed viable curriculum. And what this work does that organizations often skip, or businesses often skip, with like starting with Y, et cetera, it's like a fatal mistake. Because when teachers are trying to navigate, like, oh, do I follow the curriculum guide, or like, why am I doing this, or like, they said this, but we changed again, or there's a new regulation. When we have something like this in place, it's a sense of purpose. So without that sense of purpose, things are really hard. When we have a collective sense of purpose, a common vocabulary, like this, it's like this we believe who we are, why we're here, this is what we do and how we're going to get there. It's a lot easier for all of us in the room to point to that and say, yeah, like that's it, that's the thing. So I hope that we can.
Yes, that's basically, that captures it in a nutshell. Yeah, thank you. That captures it in a nutshell. Right, I mean, right, you find your purpose through this, you know, and it just takes a lot of pressure off of people, I think, and just provides a new way of approaching their work and approaching their experience in schools. Well, I think we've outstayed our welcome, right? Oh, one more question, yeah.
So could you bring the loop to a close, the work that you're doing with the students, with the teachers, with the administrators? What work specifically are you doing with the board? And then how do we use the data you've collected to make a difference in our strategic planning?
Yeah, we didn't really even talk about like phase 2, right, which is creating a strategic plan with, you know, through this community engagement process. So after the vision is created, in the spring and summer of next, it would be 2025, there'd be some time to work with the board on using that vision and facilitating that space for you all to then think about what are our strategic goals for the next 3, 5, whatever years you set to it. And so we could support that, or you could support your own work with that, but at least you have the vision there, and that's the work that we did like with other districts as well. Is once you've had the portrait of a learner as your North Star, now let's step backwards. What are the goals that are going to allow us to get there? So that backward design process. And so that could be, you know, Up for Learning supporting the facilitation of that with members of the Portrait of the Learner team, or it could be you all have been part, we would hope that maybe a couple board members would be part of the Portrait of the Learner team, and that you all would have some skill set to bring to the board, because that's really important. I will say, I keep using LSSU because I feel like they're a real model in my mind right now. They had 3 board members, each representing the 3 towns, Elmore, Morrisville, and Stowe, on the Portrait of a Learner team. And their job was then to go back to the board meetings every month or however often you meet and share out, this is what we're doing. This is where we're at. So they became kind of the communication tool between the board and the Portrait of a Learner process, which was really, really beautiful. And we've had that in other cases as well. But I think that spring, summer would be the work that you all would do together to really start thinking, if this is our vision, how are we going to get there?
And you've been using the word vision, Lindsay, and I'm thinking the way you're using vision, to me, encompasses vision, mission, and ends as we've come to know them.
Yes.
So this idea of refreshing the ends is embedded in the work of creating this vision that you're talking about, which I think links directly to board work and influences the ends policy. How does that read now? Which influences the interpretation of that ends policy, the data that we bring to support it. So I think that's a central piece, and that then becomes the springboard for Now, how do we strategically plan to achieve this thing?
Well, we did have a closing activity, but I think we'll pause on that. It was going to be postcards because we didn't want you to just have to sit and listen to us the whole time, but we really appreciate it. We're going to have this is another one we can save for another day if you decide this is the right process for you. But a postcard that represents what you're thinking or feeling right now. It's another one of our tools. But thank you all for this time and space and offering your values and sharing a lot with us. And I think we'll be in touch whenever it feels right. So this feels like the right process for you all. Thank you. And we'll just collect our cards. Thanks.
So I want to give everyone a chance to do their section of reading, and I had to rearrange the groups a little bit just with some changes in who's here today. So group 1, so everyone will read the executive summary, which is pages 3 through 8, and Appendix I, which is page 58 to 60. So everyone executive summary and Appendix I. Group 1, which for board members will be Melissa and Kylie. In addition to the executive summary and Appendix I, you're going to read Recommendation 1, which is page 12 to 16, and Recommendation 4, which is 40 to 44. Yep, so so board members are Melissa and Kylie, and the administrators are Ann McKinney, Andy Weiss, and Jason Rasco. So group 2, which will be with Shannon Warden and Mike Lansing, is going to be Aaron Jipner and Barb Crandall. And group 2, again, in addition to executive summary and Appendix I, you're going to read Recommendation 2. And that's page 17 to 26. Group 3, which will be with Katrina and Aaron Tebow and Aaron Boynton, is going to be Liz Sayre and Mike Dash. And again, executive summary, Appendix I, and Recommendation 3, which is page 27 to 39. And then lastly, Group 5, with Beth McGeorge, Travis Park, and myself, will be Kathy Apgar and Justin Pearson. And again, executive summary, Appendix I, and Recommendations 5, which is page 45 to 47, 6, which is 48 to 53, and 7, which is 54 to 57. Everybody has about the same amount of reading to do. Let's take 25 minutes to kind of read through that, what you're looking for in your reading. And I have hard copies of this that we can distribute. Don't pay too much attention to the groups in the back because they've all changed, but we can send these around. You're going to look for a sentence from your reading that you feel is particularly significant. You're going to look for a phrase that you think is particularly significant and a word that you think is significant. And then you'll have a chance when we get in those groups to kind of go in a circle and share each of those and then kind of unpack our context and the reading itself, and then we'll regroup and share out as a whole group. And I'll facilitate that a little bit more when we get there. But for now, 25 minutes to read your section, a sentence, a phrase, a word. Any questions?
What are the page numbers for group 1?
Oh boy.
You have it electronically already, but I'll bring it around. Ready, set, go. 25 minutes. Go wherever you're comfortable. Where it's warmer, where there's cooler. All right, you haven't quite gotten through all of the reading. That's fine. Hopefully you have at least a word, a phrase, and a sentence. And you certainly can continue to read and digest this after this meeting. I'll just sort of walk you through the protocol, and then I'll read the groups again, and we'll go from there. So as I said, you'll be in groups of 4 or 5, and sort of super quickly, the first round, each person shares a sentence that they thought was particularly significant. No discussion or justification. You don't have to say why you chose that. It's just, here's the sentence, next person, here's the sentence. Second round, each person now shares the phrase. So again, quickly, no discussion or justification. Third round, each person shares the word, same idea. And then you'll take 10 minutes as a group to discuss all the sentences and all the phrases and all the words that you heard. So sort of discuss it in its entirety. The job then of the facilitator is, with support from others that are likely in the group that have some institutional knowledge, is to offer some insight into past, current, and future work of MAUSD around some of these strategies that are being discussed. There are some strategies in here that we didn't have 8 years ago that we have now because we've done a lot of work to shift as they've described. There are some things that we're still working on, and there are other things that we know are sort of out in front of us that we need to engage in. So that's sort of the context I'm asking the facilitator to provide. After that context is set, the spokesperson is then going to take a few minutes to kind of synthesize with that small group, kind of what are the takeaways from the discussion and from your section, and be prepared as the spokesperson to report out as a whole group when we share out what our section was about and what our takeaways were. Any questions? And I'll help with the timing of that, but you can see what they are in here. And in terms of the groups, so again, they've changed a little bit from what you have on here. Group 1 actually stays the same. Group 2, Shannon, Mike, Aaron, and Barb. Justin, I moved you because we had some folks not here today. Group 3, Katrina, Aaron, but not Aaron. Liz and Mike. And then group 4 is Beth, Travis, myself, Kathy, and Justin. Kathy, if you could be the spokesperson, since Brad wasn't able to be here today. And I think all the other spokesperson and recorder assignments can stay. Okay? Ready?
I'm just curious about, we're not adjusting the time at all, given what time it is?
Let me check that. We tried to start earlier, but I don't know that we were successful. Yeah, this will take us a little past 4. So facilitators, the best you can, if you can trim your 10 minutes down. And the full group discussion is going to take a little bit, so it's hard to trim that. So I think that's the place where we can trim.
So if folks had a hard stop at 4, they should make an adjustment in their brain right now?
Yeah, I think we can be done at 4:15.
Okay.
I think that's the 15 minutes we needed that we tried to get on the front end, but didn't achieve. Okay, ready, set, go. Take your group wherever you need to, and try to monitor your times. The intent here is we'll hear from, I think we'll just hear from each group, just a sort of brief synopsis of what your conversation was, what were the takeaways, a little bit about where we've come, kind of what resonated with the group in the DMG report. And once each group's had a chance to share, then we'll just sort of open it up for general conversation, close, and that's it. And then maybe we'll...
Well, we wanted to plan the agenda or the retreat date for next year, but maybe that's just not our first business meeting.
Yeah, let's buy some time there.
Let's focus on one thing
All right, so Melissa, you're the spokesperson for Group 1.
Okay, well, I'm pretty succinct. So we had, thank you, recommendation 1 and 4. And so we had a really great conversation. Some of the things we talked about was that we need a strong foundation in a systems approach.
and that the document was clear that schools are big systems, but within that big system, there's some breaking down between general educators and the MTSS interventionists and different pockets of our community within that system, and that breakdown is obviously causing challenges. We talked about the positive impact that coaching can have, but the fact that it's used differently at each school. So we felt that there was an opportunity to message and show the value there, to then gain more benefit from it. And then that we are not going to be able to staff ourselves out of our challenges. That was the bulk of our conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Barb.
Mike? Just kidding.
We ours was titled "Provide Additional Instruction." The question was, or the statement was, provide additional instructional time outside of core subjects to students who struggle, rather than providing interventions instead of core instruction. And Shannon and I kind of explained kind of where we've gotten to as a district in elementary school is we rarely, and we really try not to, pull students out of our dedicated core time to provide them additional interventions. We wait till our win block, which was talked about earlier, or if they're a double and triple dipper, which we talked about, that's multiple interventions and multiple intensive needs. Like we put them at kind of different times the best we can, so that they don't get pulled during that kind of sacred core time. And the high school kind of does something really similar. We also talked about how the role of kind of paras in the schools now, how we want to make sure that a para, although we love them, they do a lot for the school, they aren't the most qualified to teach our neediest or most, the students with the most academic needs. We want to make sure that is our highly qualified teachers doing that, while still talking about the great values paras provide, and we kind of talked about all the great things that paras do. But when it comes to intensive students, we want our most qualified students, teachers to support them. Thank you. Mike?
Perfect. So our group looked at recommendation 3, which is to ensure learners who struggle receive all instruction from highly skilled teachers. And it's sort of set up by outlining the scope of the problem, which was something like a third or more of students needing additional support. And then highlighting some unique challenges, I think, to small schools in Vermont in particular. Challenges about timing of that support, challenges about the size of groups of similar students who need that kind of instruction, and then really a big focus on who's providing that instruction, and the idea being that somebody who really is an expert in that subject material is going to be the most efficacious at reaching those students who with those additional needs, even if that comes at the expense of maybe a larger group. And then Katrina shared a lot of the things that the district has already been doing in response to this report to really implement these best practices. And so we saw and talked about a lot of ways in which the district is organizing tiers of support that actually reflect the recommendations of this section quite well, including kind of recent additions of SEL as sort of a third component that might follow a similar kind of model. I think that mostly captured. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And Kathy.
So we figured piggybacked on a lot of what's already been said in section 5, really looking at moving away from moving away from the previous reliance on educational assistants to provide so much of the support for students with expanded needs, but then revisiting moving forward, trying to align small schools to optimize all the expertise that we've got, in looking at the fiscal restraints that we're dealing with, and how do we bring the best people that are most passionate about science and allow them to share their expertise with others. And those students who have the highest level of needs, getting those needs met in a very cohesive way. And perhaps that we'd even be looking at making changes with not closing schools, but making changes and doing a K through 2 in one school, and 3 through 5 or 6 in another school. Those are long-range goals, and fiscally they'll be very prudent on our part, and it will deliver the services to the students where they're needed. Did I catch that all? Did I?
So those are just sort of brief synopses of the different sections. We'll just turn it open for general conversation, thoughts, reactions.
I think it makes Shannon and I, I'm speaking for Shannon here, sorry. I think we feel good about, at least in section 2, like we did what they recommended. That feels nice.
And it is interesting to think about the dated piece. It was 2017, and when you combine the date of the report 2017 with what we know about systems change, which is 5 to 7 years, this is 7 years since 2017. So we've made the shifts over the time that you would expect systems change to take place. So we're kind of right where we should be in terms of, because we started implementing a lot of this, some of it before this report came out, but leaning on this report the year after it came out. I think it captures a lot of what we've been trying to do and the why behind why we've been trying to do that. And we're starting to see in pockets the return on that investment and those systems changes. We're not seeing it, broad scale right now like we'd like to see in terms of the ends report, but definitely in pockets. And now we're trying to sort of grow those pockets and replicate them throughout the system. So it's kind of the evolution of our district. And to me, it is something to celebrate and be proud of, because we've done so much of what is recommended here as best practice, and we have work to do still related to some of these things. So it helps position us to continue moving that needle a little bit. And it's really still current. These are still there isn't different reports that say there's something different you should be doing to achieve outcomes for kids. It's still focus on core instruction, instructional coaching as the best way to really move core instruction, make sure your kids with the greatest need are being paired with the adults that have the greatest expertise, carve the time out so that kids aren't pulled from core instruction to get that. That's all still today best practice. It's not outdated.
I think one of the takeaways too is that the data is outdated, especially when you look at the fiscal alignment of what it costs. And one of the things that we weren't able to look into more closely is how have we changed the IEP process? What are we really focusing on now as compared to 7 or 8 years ago? That's changed significantly. We don't have that data, and we don't have the information on which to base decisions.
I think it's going to be challenging to track that data in the linear fashion of just what we've changed from this report, because from this report has come other needs and identified, areas that needed improvement, like middle school wasn't receiving explicit reading instruction. They are now. We have a writing initiative going on throughout the whole school where there's explicit writing, because that supports reading and critical thinking. And so I appreciate good data too, and I think at least for the high school it's going to start to get murky, because as any good system grows, we've identified these other gaps and have been able to start to fill those as well, which is exciting too.
One of the hard things in education, right? How do you isolate variables to really approach it in a truly scientific way? There's too many variables at any one point to do so, but you continue to pay attention to the data that we do collect and look at different ways to collect it and adjust according to what the data tells us.
One of the takeaways that I had after hearing these in the conversation, and then really after having been on the board now for a year and a half and had many conversations at the board level and parents who brought concerns, is there's this little caveat that says something like, please note that each individual student is unique and nothing in these findings suggest otherwise. And they go on to say that this is the best practice overall, but that on a student by student basis. And I wonder as we move forward, now that these systems are in place, if that's an area that we're thinking about, the students who, while this is the right model overall, the students who might not fit into that model, and how we kind of can implement best practices for the majority, while still making sure the few don't slip through the cracks, if that makes sense. And I don't know how that looks or how one really does that, but I found it interesting that they make that caveat time and time again throughout this report. And maybe just thought we're throwing out into the ether that while it's like, I think great that we've moved fully forward through this implementation in these 5 to 7 years, that we shouldn't forget that caveat perhaps. And I don't mean to imply that you have, to be very clear, but that's something that I think maybe parents want to make sure that they're aware of, like on an individual basis.
No, I think that's a valid point. What comes to mind for me, I think about programming that we have developed at the Gray House that is highly specialized, that sort of recognizes that there's some very different needs for some students. I think about students that are placed out of district. That sort of indicates that sort of our system doesn't have what they need. It's not about them not having something, it's about us not having something. And wanting to honor that and get them what they need. And so I think those are some examples of the way we try to honor that reality, that when we're talking systems, we can't forget the individuality of each student.
Years ago, we did a book study also on the 11th and wrote a very easily digestible but had some really interesting and provocative thoughts called 6 Shifts to Improve Special Education and Other Interventions. I just sent Vicki the link if she wants to put it in the notes for you. It's readable. It had some pieces that dug just a little bit deeper into some of the components within the DMG report that our team at the time, I don't even remember how many years, but I go back to that text quite often. Like, am I crazy or did we talk about this? And it's helpful. It gives you some more practical, it's really meant for school leaders, it gives you some more practical things to think about, like that sentence in there that talks about if a student is enacting an intervention or a support for a student and there's a case manager, how do we build the time so that the two of them can connect? Sounds easy, it's not easy, and that's a piece that we've also talked about.
Is there an update to this report? Was there a new one in the works?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And I'm just really thinking that, based on our strengths and how far we've come in 7 years, it would behoove us to do a study of this type, or be a part of a study group of this type, especially to take it to taxpayers. We can say, look, this is where we've come. This is how far we've got to go.
Sure, yeah.
So
almost
how-
like
how
a
does
10
it-
years later, now what?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Now what? So how would we do that? I guess is the question.
I hope that commission will do that. That they put together a group.
The agency level.
Mm-hmm. The Commission on the Future of Public Education.
And they are going to look at everything that's out there and make a path forward.
Done.
I hope.
December?
The hope was December, but I think they pushed it out a little further. Already.
It's a big ask.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. This doesn't have to be the end of the conversation around this document, but it felt like there's so much, and we just haven't had opportunities like this yet as a board. I'd say newly formed in March, but it just got newly formed a couple of weeks ago, so it's ever changing. But I appreciate you taking the time to sort of dig into this document that's been such a foundational document for us and can help us continue to grow. Thank you.
And I think we can just go home now.
Probably do need a motion to adjourn, I guess, since we called to order.
No, this is a retreat.
No? Okay.
I didn't know we did that.
Oh, that's true. We just sort of started, right?
First thing in the summer.
I wonder if it was a hammer. Thank you to Jen for all